But anyways, let's move on now to Paul George possibly going to the Rockets. With this addition to CP3, now the Rockets name was thrown into this hat for Paul George 13, PG 13. You got the Pacers obviously still in there, the Lakers, the Celtics. Now the Rockets added into this. The Cavs were in there too. So looking at this, the question is, how does Paul George fit with the Rockets and this team that they've created?
Well, I think the two big things I look at that makes the Rockets a good fit for Paul George is two things. Number one, we mentioned it in the first segment a little bit, but I'll bring it up now to put the microscope over it, is Paul George doesn't need to take the final shot if he does not want to. We have seen, I think you mentioned, has he ever taken a final shot? And
has he ever made one?
No, he has. He's
especially
never made one. He's like 0 for 22 in his career.
Especially this past year where we saw oh shit, I got double teamed. Oh, here, let me pass it off to CJ Miles. Hey, CJ Miles, pass it back. Should never gave it up in the first place. In that point,
I think the only time he's going to hit a game winner is in that Gatorade commercial.
Yeah, where he goes, it's over. But that's number one. He doesn't have to take the final shot because you have James Harden or CP3 that could do that for you. And then number two, he just brings the defense that now CP3 brings a little, but the defense that both those two. Not James Harden, Paul George would bring more defense at the position and be able to guard different players and would help them out in that aspect.
Yeah, for sure he's going to add the defensive aspect that you need to stop a KD. I think if you add a Paul George, the question then becomes, are they better than the Warriors? Because if you add a Paul George, then I think you are propelled over the Cavs. Because I think, obviously, you don't have the player in LeBron James, but also I think you have a better player than Kevin Love. So obviously you're not going to be able to add a LeBron James or something like that. And I think James Harden right now, I would take James Harden over Kyrie. I would take Paul George over. I would take LeBron over Paul George, and then I'd take Chris Paul, and then I'd take Paul George over Kevin Love. So I think the Rockets would end up propelling past the Cavs, but then they don't have to face the Warriors in the West.
Well, here's the thing with the Rockets with Paul George when it comes to the Warriors, because if he went to the Rockets, he would have to play the Warriors before even getting to the Cavs. The one player on the Warriors that I just don't have an answer for on the Rockets is the defensive player of the year. That's Draymond Green.
Well, the only
they just don't have an answer for
the upside is that at least you have a stretch four who can match him from the outside shooting and Ryan Anderson at the moment, and unless he gets moved.
And that's the thing that I want to bring up is at least with Paul George going to the Rockets, we'll get to a little bit how he fits offensively, because that's probably the biggest way that he's might not fit is offensively with the Rockets. But looking at that, you trot out a starting lineup of Chris Paul, James Harden, Paul George, Ryan Anderson, Clint Capella. Where would the matchups lie, at least with the Warriors, Dave? Because who would be guarding who? Who would be on what? I mean, it's going to be hard for Steph to guard a James Harden or Chris Paul, but then again, would Draymond be on Ryan Anderson, or would you put him on Paul George?
No, you definitely move him up to Paul George. I think that...
Would you put KD outside and cover Ryan Anderson? What would be
the big question here is, honestly, what are the Warriors going to do at the 5? If they're going to go a small ball lineup, are we going to see Livingston in there, filling in a role and using Draymond as a small 5? I don't know. Personally, I think the matchups at point guard, shooting guard are going to be dead even. Again, you can't get around it because both Chris Paul and Harden are both excellent scorers and excellent guards. So one way or the other, it's pick your own poison. If you're trying to avoid having James Harden drive to the basket and create for everybody and draw contact all day, then you put Clay on him. Fine. If not, you can put... Honestly, I think that's the way they're probably going to have to do it, because I see Chris Paul being more likely to be the guy on an island waiting by the three-point line for James Harden to create, because this is still technically Harden's team. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a little hard to get the ball out of there. But the big matchup is still, it's who do you want guarding Paul George? And I think that Draymond is probably going to frustrate the fuck out of him a little bit more than Clay would be able to.
Kevin Durant.
Or Kevin Durant, yeah, thank you.
It's always hard to forget about Kevin Durant.
Yeah, just that guy. He's just there.
You just suck with names.
No, I think KD's matchup is, I would probably save him on Ryan Anderson. Let him save his energy. Stand around by a 3-point line and be able to just ball out on offense.
And remember, KD's 7'3".
And he can always switch too.
Yeah.
He can always switch whenever needed. I mean, that's the thing is like. Well, you mentioned pick and roll offense is going to be a pick and pop offense for D'Antoni. He's the point guard god, so all the movement in the world with that backcourt. I feel comfortable having Draymond switch on a point guard. I feel fairly comfortable having Kevin Durant switch over. I mean, yeah, he's not as quick as James Harden,
but he's got the length.
Chris Paul is 30, going on 32, 33 now. Yeah. He doesn't have the same speed that he used to. Kevin Durant, because that elite length, can kind of cover and make up for that.
Well, and then looking at this, I think the biggest question for me, and at least the biggest problem I see, is on offense, because then you have three ball-dominated guys, or at least three guys that are used to having the ball in his hands. Yeah. You look at Paul George. This is the guy at Indiana. He was going to be carrying that offense. He was going to be able to lead that offense. Yes, he's able to come off screens. Yes, he's able, but you look at Paul George. He's the guy that's going to be running that offense. He's going to be that guy that's going to be able to have the ball in his hands. Whether you're late into the clock, where again we obviously know he's terrible. John Schumann back in 2016 posted this picture of 65 field goal attempts in the last minute of a fourth quarter or OT with the score within 3 points over the last 5 seasons. Paul George shooting 16%, and that was at the start of this season. So obviously that wasn't anything impressive. And the next guy above him was DeMar DeRozan at 32. So I mean that's a big gap there. So at least with Paul George, I mean you might not want to have him take the last shot and having the ball in his hands there. And the one thing too is you have two ball-dominant guys, two guys that led the league in assists last year, Chris Paul and James Harden. So I think those guys will be in there. But would Paul George at least be limited on offense?
No.
Question.
And the thing that I look at is the thing we talked about last segment about the CP3, James Harden, who's going to have the ball because they're both ball dominant. I think that won't come into effect with Paul George because, yes, he's ball dominant now because – look at the Pacers. Who do you want to bring up the ball? Do you want anyone else? Do you want C.J. Miles bring up the ball? No.
Well, I mean, Lance Stevenson, point guard of the future.
Jeff Teague was bringing the ball.
Yeah, but you want
I'm saying
I think it'd be it would be an easier transition for him to move over to that. Hey, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to play defense on one side, and on the other side, I'm going to give you shooting to where I'm going to be here no matter which one of you two drive in. I'm going to be here. You get it to me. I'll shoot it.
Yeah, I mean, he did have a huge usage. I mean, you look at 28.9 usage in 15-16, and then last year sitting around 27.2. So, I mean, he was still having a huge usage on the Pacers. So, Dave, looking at this, I mean, would you be comfortable? Because, I mean, honestly, I think at least offensively, Paul George is going to get into that land of he's going to be the Kevin Love of the team, where he's going to be the guy that's going to be sitting on the outside. And he's an elite shooter. I mean, he's going to shoot around 40% from three. He shot around at least 9 threes a game in the past 2 years. So, I mean, he's had a high usage at least from three. But do you want to limit a guy like Paul George to just a spot-up shooter or a deadly shooter? And I mean, what's
that's the thing.
What's the way you're going to work him into the offense?
I feel like that's a concern because you have to play the game to keep him interested, keep him happy, and that's kind of like the downfall. That's what the Warriors have that no other team has is guys want to play there because everybody gets involved, everybody gets their touches, and everybody makes sacrifices. You watch Draymond's usage this year compared to last year. Last year, he was counted on much more offensively. He was one of the key guys on that offense to keep things rolling. This year, he took a backseat to Kevin Durant and everybody else and made sure that they got their touches, and he took over defensively. And that's when we're watching two people potentially being added in one offseason with Chris Paul, and if this Paul George deal does go through, I mean, you're shaking the core of a team out in the Rockets, and you're trying to see what's going to happen when everything lands. I think the best chance that this works out is that he doesn't go the route of Kevin Love. He needs to fit more in that team a la Kevin Durant. I mean, that would be best case scenario, probably not going to happen, but that's still the model you have to build around.
And something too with Kevin Durant, he chose to go to the Warriors, where Paul George isn't really choosing to go to the Rockets. It's not like the Pacers are going to accommodate him and be like, oh, you want to go to the Rockets?
And
yeah, sure.
Exactly.
And that's why I was going to throw this out is because that's the main difference. It's not like this Rocket team, we infuse Paul George.
Everything's going to work.
What are they going to have to give up to get him?
Well,
what pieces are they going to move? Do some of these players that are on the roster now that we're talking about, would they not be there because they'd have to give them up to get Paul George?
I think what I've seen, at least floating around, and I don't know if any of them are legit sources or anything, I know Eric Gordon was probably the main focus of that deal, and then future picks, because they just got rid of the 2018 top 3 protected in that Clippers one. So obviously they can't give up that, but I think future picks because I mean you look at that bench and what they have.
Hartenstein's the only guy with value.
I mean, yeah, I mean really you look at the guys that they still have on that roster. There's probably 3 guys that are locked in that are for sure staying at least. If Paul George is traded, I think it's Capella, Harden, and Paul because I don't think they're going to move Capella, and I don't really think the Pacers want Capella because they got Turner. So looking at that, I think ultimately Eric Gordon's probably going to move, which I don't think is a killer. Because you still have your mid-level exception, you still have Paul George, you still have the ability to bring in guys that fit your system. So I don't think
it's going to be a lot of creative and really smart test of their free agency and their scouting. To be honest,
and Pacers might pull a old Danny Ainge and be like, "Hey, give me your picks when Chris Paul's going to be 37 and no protection on him. Give me your 20. What would that be? +5, 2022." First-round draft picks unprotected, 2022, 2023, and 2024 unprotected. That might be what the price might be to get Paul George. I'm not entirely sure because he also drove down his value again by saying, I'm leaving this year and I'm going to go to L.A. So, I mean, that was something where he drove down his value. So, I mean, it's something that's interesting to see that, he kind of put it out there that he's going to be a rental, at least, obviously the Rockets
until
can change his mind.
And I want to ask, this is another question because you brought in that the Laker side of it. They're like the Rockets aren't the only team. The Celtics are trying to get PG-13.
Danny Ainge just sitting on a ton of draft picks.
There's something out there where if Gordon Hayward signs, they have a hypothetical deal to get Paul George.
And him signing a 3-year extension.
There's that. You have the Lakers. I know Magic Johnson is trying to do something, come up with something to get Paul George now and not wait because he could go to a Rockets. I'm doing pretty good here. I'm going to sign a little bit long term, and then you lose them.
Yeah, I mean, the question for the Lakers is, did they miss their window? Well, I mean, they didn't take the Nance Randall 27-28, so I'm kind of curious. Well, I don't know if they've got the ammo anymore.
The thing that I was going to ask is, do the Rockets eventually, with all this competition, go, you know what? We'd have to give up too much for Paul George. We're going to pull out.
I don't know.
Do they pull out of a deal because they feel like we'd have to give too much for
Rockets?
Him?
I don't think. Well, again,
do you think the Pacers would ask too much?
Well, the only thing that
other teams could accommodate it.
I only think the reason they walk away from a deal is if they're giving away too much of their core, where they're giving away a guy like Clint Capella that's going to give them no down low help, and Clint Capella's still young. Honestly, I think if they say, we want someone in that Chris Paul, James Harden, Clint Capella range, they're going to say no. But if they're like, hey, we want Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, they'll be like, fuck yeah. I don't think that
clears up a lot of cap space too, because those are your third and fourth most valuable contracts.
Yeah. So I think it's something where I don't think it's something that's going to be too much of a value. I think it's something that as long as it's something where how are the Pacers valuing them? I think that's all it is, because are the Pacers getting enough? I think it's more on the Pacers value side than it is on the Rockets, because the Rockets obviously are moving towards now. You have a 32-year-old point guard now with Chris Paul.
Correct.
James Harden's getting older. Paul George is going to be on 1-year deal. So it's really, as long as we get Paul George, it doesn't matter.
And that's why I flip that side to the Rockets, because yes, it's the Pacers that drive it, that they want to get the most out of, and where do they value Paul George. It's just do the Rockets have enough ammo to compete with a Lakers, a Celtics, which to me still looks like the front runner.
They've got the most ammo, but they never pull the trigger. We've heard Danny Ainge stories till the cows come home. It doesn't matter if he never pulls the trigger. So I think the Rockets are in win now mode, and they're going all in on this, and I love it because I can actually respect the strategy. Fine, go for it. I think they're going to throw out everything they had. I think Gordon, Anderson, and futures are absolutely amazing value for Paul George.
I think they can get any sort of, because then again, like you talked about, you're getting rid of cap room.
Yeah, and they can go out and spend some money in free agency and find more fits for this team. And they have a decent core.
And you can do 1-year deals. You can do 1-year deals, because then once those 1-year deals come up, then you can go out.
Is on a 1 year right now as well.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, but you can go out and get
Capella last year before RFA. You can go. You're on short contracts already.
Yeah, and you can go out and get guys who want to play for 1 year, and you can give them a ton of money, and then they're just gone after next year, and then Paul George signs and CP3 signs, and that's if you're winning. So
you get Carmelo Anthony.
You get Carmelo Anthony. I think the biggest thing that I think would affect the Rockets and their fit with Paul George is, again, the chemistry and what would be everybody's role, and the fact that Paul George technically isn't buying into it. He can buy into it, but he's not willingly going to be. So the thing that I want to look at is, people are talking about the fact that if CP3 and Harden can get along, the fact that CP3 was like, hey, I want to go to Houston, sign me, and then I'll opt in and then trade me. That's something where, obviously they're pairing up, they're going out, extending to each other and meeting up. I think they're also buddies and hung out in LA before. So it's something where Paul George, how does he fit in? They've obviously played together with the Olympic team. They have a little conversation there. So ultimately, if Paul George becomes a Rocket, will it work?
I think it will. I think, honestly, this is a dynamic team, but they have every tool it takes to compete at the highest level against the Warriors, in my mind. I think bench depth doesn't matter in the playoffs.
No.
To be completely honest.
As long as you have 7 players.
Yeah, I think 6 or 7, and that last guy can be iffy even. It's passable. If they make the move, and they move where hypothetical Anderson, Gordon, Anderson, Gordon picks.
Yeah.
They have the cash to spend for agency to fill out this roster to a decent enough level. I think they go, and I think they're probably again going to be like a 55-win team and potentially be right in there against the Warriors, probably in like the second or third round. Because honestly, those 3 guys on a team make me completely step over San Antonio. And that sounds disrespectful to Kawhi right now.
There's just Kawhi.
But it's only him at this point. And I think everybody else is aged out. I mean, Tony Parker looked amazing until he was hurt.
And we don't know what's going to happen to Simmons and Patty Mills.
And LaMarcus.
And LaMarcus
doesn't want to be there.
Yep.
He doesn't want to be there. So
there's too many questions there as well. So I think, honestly, it's looking like a Western Conference potential showdown between the super team and the new super team. And it's like, I'm kind of hyped to see it, honestly.
It's one of those, like, I look at it and go, yeah, Paul George, that kind of levelness I was going between the Spurs and the Rockets, Paul George just boosts them over the Spurs. But my big thing when we talk Warriors-Rockets, if we put Paul George on this team, because you'd be giving up an Eric Gordon, because you'd be giving up Ryan Anderson, my big thing is, yeah, you've tried to find answers for Steph, Clay, and Durant, but you still got Draymond there.
They weren't really finding an answer in Clay. I think I'd still take Harden over Clay, and don't go back to last year's rankings. I get it. We put Clay over Harden. My bad.
I'm just saying.
Told you guys.
Draymond is still there, and I don't think
I agree.
The Rockets would have anybody to kind of fit like.
But out of those 4, if I'm like, anyone could beat me on offense, I'm picking Draymond Green to beat me on offense. I'm not going to go after the 2-time MVP in Steph Curry, the toaster in Clay.
But
Clay Thompson is going to go off for 39 and a quarter, and then Kevin Durant, who's one of the, if not the best scorer in the NBA.
But Draymond actually, as he's kind of matured with the player,
he's a good scorer.
He's now become fuck it. You're going to leave me wide open? I'm going to challenge it.
I'm still saying I would rather have
take your chances
Draymond
with him.
Shoot wide open threes than Steph Curry, the greatest 3-point shooter in NBA history, to shoot wide open threes. Or Klay Thompson, the toaster.
Matter. Steph Curry will just back up until he's open, and then he'll make it.
Or Klay Thompson, the second best 3-point, or third best, or top 5 best 3-point shooter of all time.
Let's be honest.
Or Kevin Durant, one of the best scorers of all time.
Steph Curry's open as soon as he walks into the gym.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's something where out of those 4, I'm fine if Draymond Green is the one beating me, because I don't want the other guys beating me, because we know what they can do. If we're shutting those guys down, then great, we're doing something well. Ultimately, I think it's. I don't know what's going to happen. I think that's why this time's so much fun. I don't think anything's going to happen. I don't think Paul George is moving.
You know what's hilarious, though?
What's that?
If the Rockets get Paul George, what does that mean for Russell Westbrook's future? Like, where is he going? Because I know there's like kind of inklings of if he doesn't sign the contract extension, he could move. But does this kind of affect other teams like in that West, like teams we haven't talked about? The Thunder's the one I look at.
I don't know. It's interesting. I think how it affects other teams in the West, I think it's really then you're putting a microscope on the Spurs. Because Clippers are obviously falling down because Blake's not coming back. Chris Paul's not coming back. JJ's not coming back. They look like they're going to get DeAndre Jordan away. So they're falling down. Utah, if they lose Gordon Hayward, they're most likely going to take a fall just because they're losing probably their best scorer. Rudy's still there, obviously, but still that team's going to take a hit. I mean, ultimately, it's going to make it put a microscope on the Spurs, and can you keep it as a 3-team kind of race there. So I think that's probably the where we're gonna leave it there, because I think it's interesting. Ultimately, I don't think Paul George gets moved. I think the Pacers are still gonna hold on to him because they're not gonna get enough value. I mean, do you guys agree, disagree
until
on
the
that?
trade deadline?
Until the trade deadline?
Yeah, he's gonna get moved for something.
Do you think he goes to the Rockets at the trade deadline?
I think he goes during this free agency period.
You think so?
I think he goes before the start of the season.
Where's he going?
I'm still leaning towards. I want to lean Rockets at this point because they actually have momentum and they look like they're trying to get shit done. Danny Ainge has he's the one man who can decide this. If he wants to throw the money on the table, he can do it and just be done with it. It's in his hands. Like, it should be the Celtics. It should be obvious and done.
Well, I'll throw out two. If it happens in free agency, it's the Celtics. The only way it's happening this offseason is if Hayward goes to Boston.
You mean during the trade deadline, it's Boston?
No, like this offseason, it's Boston. Because if Gordon Hayward says, I'm going to Boston, that's the only way Paul George gets moved this offseason.
Okay.
At the trade deadline...
Okay. You said offseason free agency, so
I kind of want to say anything goes.
Because what's his value for the last 30 games of the year?
I kind of want to say, and that's why I want to throw out the Cavs if it's the trade deadline, because the Cavs might be like, fuck it, let's just get a deal. Let's try to get something done to get him here so that we can compete, because we're going to win the East.
The only reason why I don't think Boston is going to do it, and it's from a tweet from Newbeck on Twitter. It says, Daryl Morey out here executing another trade for a superstar while Danny Ainge is busy sending reporters texts about what he might do. Danny Ainge has not proven that he can man up and make a trade, and he's still got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. He's got these assets out of the ass.
He's got 6 wings.
And hasn't moved any of them. So I ultimately don't think the Celtics are going to make a move for Paul George unless they do sign to Gordon Hayward, which I don't know is going to happen. Obviously, they have a meeting on Saturday, Gordon Hayward and the Celtics, but let's not get in Gordon Hayward right now. We'll probably talk about him on Saturday.
We're going to talk to him.
I hope so. That'd be awesome.
Big fan of the show.